Unpopular opinion, but the Trump trade tariffs are a good thing, in my opinion. Obviously, there's lots of, speculation, rumors, like different ideas floating around. There are many positives to the Trump trade tariffs. If he can bring manufacturing back to the US, boost jobs, boost the economy. Obviously, there are a lot of downsides. There are, inflationary risks, trade war risks, like lots of different ups and downs. So, but generally, the market has been pricing this as a bad thing. However, I don't really see it that way. I mean, that's generally because I'm a long-term investor and I see, this as a perfect buying opportunity. I was able to buy in due to the massive panic on Monday. People were saying it was going to be Black Monday and the stock market was going to drop 20%. Jim Cramer being one of the examples. And when Jim Cramer just says something, expect the opposite. There's a funny thing that the inverse of what he does is actually beats the market. So that's that's a funny thing to note. If you look into my buys for the week, if you go here, we go down, we can see that I bought 2 shares of Tesla at 229.12 per share, and I bought 1.9 shares of Tesla at 223.77. And then more recently, I bought 0.5 shares at Tesla at 247.49. So what does that mean for my Tesla position? So I did 4.4 shares of Tesla to my stocks and shares ISA now that I can continue to add money to the account. And obviously Tesla has been very interesting. If you look at the month chart on Tesla, we can see we were, we had a little bit of a recovery. We were hovering, at the 280s, and we dropped down to 250s, then we're hovering at the 270s, and then obviously, tariffs, and then we instantly dropped down to, 216, 215, 220. I did, was buying the market open, in the 220s, and then we did see a recovery to the 240s. I just bought, that was when I bought another half share. And then we had a little bit of a pullback. There was still some uncertainties. Now we have instantly seen Trump has put a freeze on all tariffs other than China. He's still going to war with China. China was the biggest, fighter with America. Now, obviously, I do think Trump has more leverage in terms of the cards to play, with how he goes about it. Obviously, China wants to access the American consumer a lot more than America wants to access the Chinese consumer, just because there are different, different markets, and the American companies generally tailor their products to the American people, and they're just different markets. Obviously, China does like to have a massive export to increase its GDP. Because obviously we know, exports minus imports is what your net gain to your GDP is for a country is. So China purposely, deflate the value of their currency, and just force, manufacturers to either partner with the Chinese government in terms of 50-50 split when opening factories in China. So there's lots of things they do, and Trump basically wants to even the playing field between the two countries. So it's very complicated to go into all the different nuances with how it's all going to work. Even the smartest people don't really know what's right or wrong. I only see this as a massive win just because we've had a massive buy the dip opportunity. So what does that mean for my portfolio? Well, if we go to my portfolio, we see I currently own 386.5 shares of Tesla in this account. Now that's makes my current value of Tesla £81,380. I'm up 8.64%. Currently plus £6,474. I did bring my average price down slightly, because I bought the dip, so that's gone down to $250 a share. It's basically the same, because it's just the point number that's gone down a bit. So what does that mean for my portfolio? Well, if we go over to the value of my portfolio, it's crazy to think that when I did the last update of this portfolio, I was sitting, in the, about the £70,000 mark, which was about here. And then, obviously we did have the crash, bought the dip. My portfolio was looking quite bad at £65,000. There was a small part of me that wanted to sell and wait and buy back again when it went down lower. And obviously I was like, I'd say to myself, no, don't do that. Obviously, not financial advice. You do your own research when making decisions in the stock market. But I have made that mistake in the past where it was going down, and I wouldn't say I panic sold, but I sold, and I was expecting it to go down further, and it didn't, and it did the opposite, and I ended up losing money. So when I had those thoughts again about selling and buying back at a lower price, basically trying to gain the system, I was like, nope. Remember what happened last time? You lost money, and I just held. I bought the dip, and then we saw a massive, if you look on the 1 day, massive 23.9% jump in the last 24 hours. So yes, that would have been painful. But if I missed this, like if I sold, I waited for a dip, and it just went up 23.9%, that would have been painful. I'm so glad I didn't sell my position. I just continued to hold. Time in the market always beats time in the market. From my personal experience and just from the research out there. I did have those thoughts of selling my portfolio. I think everyone does. I think you'd have to be a robot not to have those thoughts or not to have a little bit of panic. But when it comes to investing, it's all about controlling those emotions and just sticking it out. As you guys can see, haven't put any new money in. I still use £800 of my ISA allowance. And when I get paid, I will add a little bit more than that. Generally, I add money to that every Friday. Let's just generally have when I get paid, I have a little bit of cash, just because I was heavily buying the dip. And all of my investments, £81,000. Tesla currently sitting at 386.5 shares in this account, and obviously I've got another 105 shares in my general investment account. So I'm 8.5 shares away from my goal of 500 shares across both accounts. So yes, it's looking really good now. I'm really happy with the progress back up. Across both accounts, I'm back over the 6-figure mark. If we do go into the 1 year chart, we work. It's still quite a ways away from me being back at all-time highs in this across both portfolios. In this portfolio, I did hit £141,000. At the height of Tesla, when Tesla was just going crazy after the whole Trump getting elected, and it has since had a pullback. But I think coming into the later of this year, I know deliveries for Tesla, actually delivering the vehicles, has been weak. But with their rollout of their full self-driving software, whether that's in Austin or LA, and that Optimus robot, when that enters, starts to enter mass production in 2026, as long as Tesla's new cheaper vehicles, I was saying this about 2024 and 5. I thought they were going to be good years for Tesla, but if and don't get me wrong, they were. We saw massive growth in their battery division in 2024. 2025 we'll start to see the first rollout of full self-driving unsupervised in terms of robo-taxis. The first robo-taxis are being planned to launch in 2025. But if you look into the future, obviously this is just my opinion, in 2026, 2027, 2028, those are going to be where Tesla absolutely dominates. And that's the main reason why I'm holding a lot of Tesla, just all in on Tesla. Obviously there are a lot of good companies out there. I would love to own other companies, like your AMDs, your Nvidias, just the whole artificial intelligence. That market's going to be so big. I do want to hold other names, but when you're investing, there's this thing called opportunity cost. And if I was putting some of my money, diverting it into these companies, yes, I would be getting a gain, but at what cost? At the cost of missing out on Tesla's opportunity. And yes, if Tesla underperforms those other stocks, there's the opportunity cost in the reverse direction. And it's just trying to work out what gets you the best return for your money. Because obviously if you have lots of money, you have millions, then you don't really need to worry about this, because you have more money than ideas to put it into. But right now, when I'm, put, having to decide with limited amounts of money, what's the best way to invest it, I do have to kind of try and weigh up the opportunity costs when it comes to how I distribute that money into the market. Anyway, guys, I hope that made sense to you guys. If you like the video, please hit that like button. It really helps to grow the channel. Also, comment down below what your feelings like. What was that the bottom we just hit, or our stock's going to continue to crash down? Just share your opinion down below in the comments below. I'll try and respond to as many comments as I can. And if you thought someone else might like the video, share with a friend. Anyway, guys, that's it for me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.